7 signals, 4 names, 1 route, and no exit points. What if the path they were following was not just lost, but looped? Everything they transmitted was recorded. Everything they could show was found. Except for one thing: how to get out. This is a story about a closed route where every new step is already someone else's old one. San Juan County, Colorado, July 1998. 3 childhood friends, brothers, Landon and Zach Graves, and their high school buddy, Jake Hivers, are planning a trek. They are joined by a 4th member, Greg Miller, a licensed guide and former volunteer rescuer with the Pitkin Mountains. The route is a 3-day trek along the Elk Creek Range, over Hazel Pass, and down to Queen Lake Base Camp. Park Service registration is complete. The weather is stable, up to 78 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. No precipitation. All participants are healthy, have experience with moderate difficulty hikes. 2 have personal GPS trackers. The instructor has a satellite phone. They leave at 7:45 in the morning on July 5th. The starting point is the parking lot off Highway 145. The first day of the route is documented in detail. At the Bear Loop Pass, they take photos and send SMS with coordinates to relatives. At 19:20, a voice call is recorded from Miller's phone. A short message: "Set up camp. Everything according to plan. We'll be heading to the ridge in the morning." The next day, they set off at 6 in the morning. They reach Elk Creek Ridge by 8. This is where the most controversial part of the route begins. The trail restoration reports from this period noted that the southern flank of the ridge is unstable. Rock slides often occur there in the spring months. Miller specifies in his plan: check on site, decision on descent on site. He was experienced and probably wanted to use the connection with the Western Trail so as not to drag the group along precarious sections. From 9 to 11, nothing suspicious. The photo archive of the participants, later removed from the film of a disposable camera, confirms the group moved together. One of the frames shows all 4 of them stopping by a stream, including the time on the clock, 10:44. Next comes the key point. According to the call log, at 11:31, there was a short signal from Miller's phone. The voice was Greg. He said, "I'll go check the plumb line. I'll be back in half an hour." Then there was silence. There is no immediate alarm. The group remains where they are. Later, testimony shows Jake and Zach resting, Landon drinking water at the edge of the drop-off. 40 minutes pass, then an hour and a half. Calls to the satellite phone go unanswered. At 3:42 p.m., the Park Service receives an emergency call from a phone registered to Jake Hivers. "One has gone. We don't know where. The map doesn't match. There's no way through here. We demand evacuation." The recording is interrupted. 20 minutes later, a second signal comes in, this time from Landon Graves' phone. The message reads, "We got separated. I lost contact. I can't see anyone. The coordinates aren't where we were this morning. Before evening comes, 2 more calls will come in, both from different devices, both from different locations, and neither of them will match the actual location of the tent that the searchers will later find. When Greg Miller left to check the plumb line, the group had no idea it would be the point of no return. According to Jake Hivers, he set out calmly, lightly, without his main pack, but with a fanny pack that usually held his GPS, knife, and radio. He was walking toward the southwest ridge, where the map indicated an unstable ledge. Miller planned to determine whether to go over it or find a detour. They waited for him for an hour, then another half hour. After an hour and a half, Landon began to offer to follow him, but, according to Jake, they had a clear agreement. If someone left, the rest would wait at the point, and it would have looked like an accidental retreat, if not for one detail. Miller's satellite phone was left behind at the camp. This became clear when they tried to contact each other. The phone was switched off, but in the side pocket of his backpack, neatly zipped. That is, Miller left without it. This was contrary to his habits. He always kept the phone with him, especially in unstable areas. At 3 p.m., after nearly 3.5 hours of waiting, the group began to panic. Jake tried using his cell phone, but there was no signal in the area. Landon's GPS began to malfunction, shifting coordinates every 2 minutes as if the device was losing its fixed position. So Jake made an emergency call through the backup SMS system, a device that can be programmed with emergency phrases. The message got through, but it was cut off. Base only received part of it. Request evacuation. At 14:40, the group decided to split up. Landon said he followed the ridgeline, hoping to find a place where he could yell down into the ravine. Jake and Zach waited. It was at this point that the second signal came in from Landon. He claimed to be in a different location than he had been that morning, but the map he had brought with him was a handwritten copy. It did not have the alternate route marker found later in Miller's backpack. 25 minutes later, Landon is also out of contact. He doesn't make contact. Jake and Zach are left alone. They spend the night at the camp, but the next morning, July 6th, the tent is empty. Their tracks go in different directions. At 9:20 in the morning, a third signal comes in from Zach Graves' device. According to the logs, the transmission took 6 seconds. I went down lower. They don't answer. I heard a voice, but the coordinates are not exact. This phrase would later become one of the most discussed in the service reports. By all accounts, contact with the 3 participants had already been lost by that point. Who spoke and whose voice Zach heard remains unknown. The last signal from Jake came in at 11 o'clock. It was short, with pauses between words, as if the transmitter was glitching or the man was speaking through static. The slope is wrong. There is no way up. I have returned, but I cannot find the tent. At this point, the Park Service had already activated the helicopter. But when the search party arrived at the coordinates transmitted by the system, they were not there. At the site, they found only a charred fire 2 empty flasks and tracks that led not to the route, but deeper into the slope, to an area where there were no paths at all. When the rescue team reached the supposed point of the signal received from Jake Hivers, the GPS indicated coordinates that did not match either the official trails or the route scheme approved before leaving. The area where the signal led was a section of an old scree slope from which some rock was removed during restoration work back in the 1980s. On modern maps, it was marked as impassable, but according to satellite photography, there was a shadow cast by a vertical cliff and a narrow strip of burnt earth in that place, as if someone had burned a fire there. Rescuers found the remains of a campsite. Not a tent, just a fire pit covered in ash, charred fabric that looked like a fleece sleeve, and an overturned aluminum pot. No signs of a struggle, no blood, but the ground around was scorched locally, as if someone had deliberately removed any possible prints. The main oddity is the lack of clear traces of retreat. The trail leading to the camp had partial prints, soles, matching the footwear described in the application for the hike. But they are all in one direction, not a single one in the opposite direction. About 30 feet from the fire, they found a GPS tracker, Jake's device. It was on, but the tracks it recorded had stopped the day before, 12 hours before the signal. The last point was almost a mile to the north. Logic dictated that either he had turned off the GPS or was moving without it. But the signal that had found him had come from this device. When the coordinates were loaded into the retrospective tracking system, a second discrepancy emerged. At the time the signal was transmitted, the GPS beacon was not transmitting the geolocation. The transmitter was working, but the receiver was not. This is recorded in the logs. The signal was transmitted as a voice emergency call, a function built into the model, which, according to Jake's family, he did not have. The device was a basic version. While attempts were being made to sort out the equipment, a new factor appeared in the rescue camp. One of the dog handlers who had walked along the line of the northern ridge reported that the dog had led him to a strange object. In a crevice between 2 boulders at the height of a human chest, someone had left a plastic tag with a number. The number was 8735. It was not listed in the park tag system or in the personal belongings database of the expedition participants, but one of the investigators found a document in the archive. This was the code on the safety rope that instructor Greg Miller had received back in 1996 during his mountaineering training course. If he had the cable with him, who and why removed the tag and left it in the rock? A search was underway for Zach Graves. His signal was never detected again, but at 6:40 a.m. the next morning, a helicopter pilot reported visual contact with what looked like a residential tent. From the air, it looked like a single tent pitched at the foot of a rocky outcrop. When they got there, it turned out that this was their tent, only it was located 3 miles south of the supposed camp, and none of the GPS logs recorded such a movement. Inside are 2 sleeping bags, a pair of boots, and a handwritten note. We waited. He didn't come. He went west. Then east again. I don't understand. The note was unsigned, but the handwriting did not match either Greg's or Landon's. A comparative analysis showed that the text was probably written by Jake. And then the main question arose: if he wrote it here, who sent the signal from the point where his beacon was found? On the 4th day of the search, with the main camp set up on the eastern slope of Hazel Pass, one of the operators received a notification from an autonomous seismic monitoring station installed in 1996 on the southern edge of the Elk Creek Range. The station usually recorded ground movements and microslips in the snow, but at 7:31 a.m., the device detected a sound, a pulse at a frequency characteristic of short-range voice transmission in the radio range. It was not interference. It was a signal directed from somewhere along the plumb line. The spring was estimated to be within 600 feet of the bluff, where no trail passed, but where, according to a 1970s archival map, there had once been a logging route. It had long since been abandoned, and part of it had been destroyed by a landslide. The rescue party, including 2 climbers and 1 technician, set off toward the suspected point. By lunchtime, they had reached a section of the rock face that offered a wide view of the valley, and it was there, on a narrow ledge 30 feet below the cliff, that they saw a piece of cloth pinned to the ground, a folded high-visibility vest. It was tied to a tree root with thin nylon tape. When we got down, we found a small bundle nearby, a plastic bag wrapped in a rain cover. Inside was a spiral-bound notebook with traces of moisture, but still legible. The last pages contained short, fragmentary notes. "Not up there. It's empty again. I hear them coming, but they don't see the light. Signal, lower. Check, dismiss." The handwriting was uncertain, hasty, and in some places the lines were uneven and ran sideways, as if written on the knee. There were no signatures, but on the inside cover was a name: Landon G. This was the first material trace of Landon Graves. But here's what the climbers recorded immediately after the discovery. One of them tried to use the radio to call the base, but the connection dropped sharply. The signal level dropped to 0, and only when the emergency frequency was turned on channel 45, did the following fragment sound in the headphones. "Audens reception. Not there. Not up. Error." The connection was lost. This signal could not be recorded, but it was confirmed by the second radio, which was in the technician's possession. When the team returned to the ridge, they began filming in detail with drones. In one video, recorded from above the same area, they noticed a thin line on the slope. When zoomed in, it was visible, a trace, more like a furrow, going down, as if someone had been dragging an object or sliding down. The length was about 40 feet. The trace ended abruptly at the point where the talus layer began. There were no prints or deviations in the relief beyond that. Later, a report on a similar anomaly will be found in the archive. In 1984, in the same area, a similar trail was recorded. Then, a local gamekeeper trainee, Carl Andrews, disappeared. They also searched for him along the line of the old route and also found only one trail, which began but did not end. With the discovery of Landon's note, the situation officially went down to the category of multiple uncoordinated disappearances. And in the headquarters tent on the route board, a new diagram would appear, handwritten. It had signal points on it. They formed a strange zigzag, but if you connected them with a line, the route converged at one point. The problem was that this point was the upper part of the plateau near the pass, where the group did not plan to be at all. It wasn't on Miller's map, and in the drone footage it was empty, or almost empty. In the last zoomed-in frame, a tent was visible in the shadows of the trees, not theirs, and not a Service One. At dawn on the fifth day, rescuers sent a ground team to a plateau east of the ridge where a drone had spotted the light shape of a tent hidden in the shadows of the canopy. According to all maps, both archival and updated, this section was not on Miller's route. Logistically, getting there would require at least a 5-mile detour from the plan, including crossing rocky terrain where no route had been recorded in the last 2 decades. The group got there by midday. The tent was on a flat area cleared of branches. Visually, it was in good condition. A standard tourist model designed for one person. No identification marks, no damage, fasteners closed, guy ropes secured, nothing suspicious on the outside. Inside, one sleeping bag, one backpack, and a map. But not the one the group was walking along. The map was a printed copy of the Elk Creek Ridge route, but it was marked with handwritten notes in black gel pen. They did not match any known navigational template. Some sections were crossed out with X's, and 3 words were handwritten along the line of the eastern slope. There is no return here. Inside the backpack is a standard set: water, first aid kit, batteries, a pack of nuts, a flashlight. In the side compartment is film for the camera and a box of batteries. At the bottom is a clean notebook. No name, no markings, no traces of personal belongings, except for one thing. A wallet was found in the pocket of the sleeping bag. In it is an ID. Name, Zach Graves, age, 23. The document is dry, with no signs of long-term exposure to the open air, as if the tent had been erected very recently. There was no GPS or beacon signal from him. There was no phone in the backpack, no radio either. When this point was compared with the route of movement according to satellite logs, it turned out that none of the signals from the group's devices were recorded in this place. That is, none of the 3, Jake, Landon, or Miller, passed here. In addition, the tent was in an area where there was no communication at all. Not a single radio, even a strengthened one, could penetrate the signal from this point towards the base camp. But it was from here, as the directional antenna would later confirm, that one of the recorded voice calls came. The very one where one could hear, "There is no way up, I am back." Then the question arose, if Zach's tent was set up here, who moved it and when? And most importantly, how? The rescuers noted that none of the approaches to this site had traces. neither from the east nor from the north. The moss and grass under the awning were partially pressed down, but not dead, as after one night, and the supplies in the backpack were enough for 2 days. All this indicated that someone had lived here very recently. But if it was Zach, why didn't he get in touch? Why didn't he leave a note if he saw that they were looking for him? An hour after the tent was discovered, the rescuers who were at the pass reported by radio. We heard a voice to the south, brief, just "hey," then silence. They headed in that direction, and 500 yards from the tent, they found a second map. Someone had hung it on a tree branch at eye level. It was old, faded, and cracked, but in the center was a fresh stamp in red ink. DFR, outbound, 1984. It was a departmental map of another expedition, a search expedition, the same one in which Carl Andrews disappeared in that area. On the 6th day of the search, rescuers called the parents of all 3 missing men, Graves and Hivers, to the camp. The goal was not only to obtain biographical and medical information, but also to verify one key detail: whether any of the participants could have known in advance about the area where Zach's tent was found. The answer was negative. Neither Zach nor his brother Landon nor Jake had ever mentioned this slope. The paperwork provided when registering the route did not even list this area as a discussion area. At the same time, the first results of the analysis of the found objects began to flow into the headquarters. The examination of the map found near Zach's tent was especially important. The paper was new, but the inscriptions were made with ink that was more than 2 weeks old, as spectral analysis showed. This meant that the notes had been made long before the expedition. But by whom? When they checked the notebook found at the cliffside containing Landon's notes, a new anomaly emerged. The paper and handwriting matched the journal he kept at home. But one of the phrases written on the last pages was a verbatim copy of a line found in the 1984 Carl Andrews file. I hear them coming, but they don't see the light. This identical wording appeared in the case materials only after questioning an eyewitness, Andrews' colleague, who claimed to have heard these words from him on the radio a day before his disappearance. At that time, this phrase was recorded from dictation on a magnetic tape. Now it has appeared in the possession of the missing person, who did not have access to the archive. Meanwhile, one of the rescuers found a strange contradictory fact in the camp. On a piece of paper packaging from an energy bar were the initials J.H., Jake Hivers. The wrapper was fresh, without traces of moisture or mold. But the problem is that according to protocol, tourists carried all packages and waste in themselves in dry bags. Jake was especially strict about this. His mother confirmed he sewed the trash organizer himself. Does this mean that someone left this packaging on purpose? The next conflict of versions arose when Landon's GPS tracker was checked. The track saved on the device showed a strange movement logic. For 2 hours, according to the logs, he moved from the camp to the northwest. But then the track broke off, and 2 hours later, it resumed in the southeast, at a point from which he could not have gotten without a direct passage through an impassable area. Physically, it's impossible, but the coordinates are confirmed. The only option is that someone moved his device. Officially, two scenarios emerged. Landon was accompanied by someone, consciously or not. Perhaps he was not alone when he made the notes. Someone found Landon's device before rescuers arrived and tried to mislead them. Later that evening, new information came in. One of the signalmen working at the relay station on the northwestern border of the park reported there was a short broadcast on Channel 48. Someone repeated, "I came out, but they didn't." The voice is not identified, but its spectrum is saved in the system. It does not match the voices of Jake, Landon, or Miller. Moreover, this voice was already in the database. A recording of a similar phrase was received from a route in Pitkin County in 1987 during the disappearance of two climbers. At that time, the report considered this to be radio interference. Now it sounded like someone else's words were being repeated. The last recorded activity of the group's GPS devices occurred on the night of July 6 and 7. At 9:45 in the evening, the logger, formerly owned by Jake Hivers, gave a short signal. It recorded the position on the edge of a rock fault east of the pass, and 7 seconds later, the point disappeared. No route to it, no coordinates from where it was obtained, just a single mark. In the system, it was listed as floating, that is, outside the extended track. A navigation system specialist from a neighboring county took up the matter. He conducted a retrospective analysis of all 7 GPS logs received from the group and rescuers and discovered an anomaly that simply does not occur in normal terrain. Almost all devices, including rescuers' trackers, within a 2-mile radius of the old map marked DFR, outbound, 1984, began to record an unstable time shift. A simple example: if the GPS was turned on in this area and began to write a route, the time of the points was behind or ahead of the real time by 3 to 4 minutes. Not along the entire route, but only at the moments of direction changes, as if space was lagging behind the movement. This could have been caused by problems with the firmware of the devices, but the loggers were of different generations, companies, and with independent antennas. The problem was not in the devices. The technical report sent to headquarters on the 3rd day after the analysis contained one key phrase: "Not a single device that has visited the sector between the southern scree and the plateau 44.19.107.06 has formed a correct return route." This meant that there was a track there, but there was no track back. Navigation points were written inside, but not out. That is, the device recorded the path, but as soon as the person tried to return along the same coordinates, the logic broke down. The device thought that it was standing still or moving forward, although the person was returning back. This was exactly what matched the phrase heard on the frequency, "I'm back, but I can't find the tent." At the same time, the signalman analyzed all the signals received. They retained the so-called digital fingerprints of the voices, marks by which it was possible to determine from which equipment and at what frequency the phrase was transmitted. The conclusion turned out to be even stranger. 3 signals, received 2 days apart, formerly came from the same frequency. But the transmitter corresponding to this code was decommissioned and dismantled in 1985. And there he stood, 45 feet from the spot where Carl Andrews' map was found. At the logical level, it was impossible. There was no transmitter, but there were signals. Moreover, with phrases that matched the already documented words from old disappearances. After the Miller, Graves, and Hivers operation was closed, the area was officially closed to visitors. An internal Park Service order stated, "The zone between coordinates 44.19, 107.06, and 44.21, 107.10 is to be designated as inactive. Do not use for routes. Navigation and voice signals within this sector are not to be considered reliable. The area is currently not marked on tourist maps. A temporary wooden marker with coordinates, but no name has been installed at the site of Zach's tent. The report lists it as the 15th point of loss of the return route. And most importantly, neither Jake nor Landon nor Greg were ever found. Their things, their notes, their words, they were preserved. But everything that could show the way back was gone.